Welcome to episode 8 of Inside Politics, for teens by teens, where I explore the politics and issues impacting our generation. I'm your host, Christina Li, and today I'm focusing on the effects of the coronavirus pandemic on Korean international students. For this, I've invited Charles Yoon, a senior at Phillips Academy, Andover. Charles, how are you doing today?
I'm good. It's 8 a.m. in the morning here. It's quite early, but I'm up for this, so.
Got it. So do you want to talk a little bit about any and all thoughts you have about the pandemic?
Yeah, I can. That's a big question. But I think when I think of the current coronavirus epidemic, pandemic, whatever you want to call it, I think definitely the first thing that comes to mind, especially in relation to politics, is just the American response to it. So I am a Korean international student, but I'm also Korean American. I live in Korea right now, but I grew up in the United States. And the stark contrast in the Korean and American response to the epidemic has been interesting to watch and continue to evolve, because Korea was able to manage the pandemic quite well. We were one of the first countries to be affected, other than China, which was the origin. And once the virus came over, we were able to contain it using standard procedure. We had some rough bumps on the way. I can get into this later, but there's basically a religious cult that told their infected cultist members to not quarantine themselves. And there's a huge explosion in cases, basically. And that happened. And soon, very quickly after that, we became the second most affected country in the world. We are no longer that. I think that goes to Italy now. Press that for them. But I think we were able to deal with the situation pretty well. You know, once that happened, we were able to quarantine effectively. We made drive-through lab test kits or whatever. And people were able to first respect self-quarantine and the government's orders, be able to test themselves and go to medical facilities if they needed them to be tested or to get medicine or to stay in touch. And so we were able to basically get through most of the worst parts of it and quote unquote flatten the curve, right? Compare that to the United States. I think it's a little evident that our response in that regard has not been very well done. You know, initially we regarded the pandemic as not a really big deal, despite the fact that cases were going up and, officials were saying, or medical professionals were saying, it looks like it's going to grow exponentially, because that's how pandemics grow. And then, there's that turning point, that 1 or 2 day turning point where the NBA shut down, Tom Hanks announced he had coronavirus, and then soon, quickly after, all the major sports leagues shut down and multiple officials and celebrities all announced that they had coronavirus, and it kind of changed the virus's perception in America. And then it just kind of became I think everybody is doing one of two things. They're either going completely insane and buying all the toilet paper they can find everywhere, which is kind of useless, or they're continuing to live in a disillusioned reality that this isn't going to affect them because it's not that big of a deal. It's not going to kill them. It's not going to affect them. It's not going to affect their kids. So it's totally fine. And of course, that's kind of a very selfish and not very, deep view of the situation, because the coronavirus, while its effects on kind of teenagers and, young adults is, it's not going to be that bad. You might have a really bad flu, but you're not going to die. But first of all, there is a chance you might die. And there's a chance that you can pass it on to someone who has, some problems with their immune system, or to the elderly, and they are highly, highly susceptible. I think people,
government also holds this kind of disillusioned view and thus is not taking enough action.
I think so. I think I would agree with that, because I think the problem lies in the fact that, well, first of all, Mr. Donald Trump, our president, has not handled this situation very well, right? I think I was getting to this idea that I think he is one of the main sources of this disillusionment, because you have to remember, very early on in this pandemic, he basically said it doesn't exist. It's a democratic hoax, right? He insisted that it wasn't that big of a deal. Once it blew over and once it's getting really big now, he still doesn't really know how to handle it, right? There was that famous clip of him being yep, right after he gave his announcement, He doesn't know what he's doing with Mike Pence, what he's doing, why he's in charge of the coronavirus handling situation, cutting funds. It's not quite the response you would want. Right, testing kits are still at an absolute critical low in the United States, and he continues to just say, we have the best testing kits. We have the biggest and coolest testing kits, when really that's not what's happening at all. So I think it's definitely correlated, probably directly related to the fact that the government's response has been, pathetic, to be honest.
So what kind of lessons do you think that what kind of pages could the United States take out of Korea's book in terms of their handling of the crisis?
Okay, I think number one, you can definitely take away the fact that testing kits need to become widely available, right? I think that's a pretty big deal, especially for a pandemic at this scale. Because it's highly infectious, it doesn't show symptoms until quite a few days after, right? That's a little different than most other dangerous viruses, but it still can kill. And so testing kits is an absolute priority for a virus like this, highly infectious and hidden. And so the fact that that has to be proliferated throughout the general population is really important. And unfortunately, it doesn't seem like that's a possibility, not just because of shortages, but also because of just the fact that we're not producing enough. And we're just not prioritizing it, right, from the government. So Korea immediately prioritized it, and they set up a bunch of things. The government and the medical professionals worked together to set up testing kits, mass producing testing kits, being able to distribute them for free or for a very low price, right, around the cost of $3 to $4, I think. So it was widely available, it was marketable, it was commercial, and you were able to buy it and test yourself, right, if you had a few symptoms. That's really important. I think the second thing we have to take away from this is there's three things. So I think the second thing we have to take away from this is how important and how misleading misinformation can be, right? Because one of the main reasons the government is mishandling this is because they're not being trustworthy. They're not being the authority and the leader that they're supposed to be in a situation like this, right? South Korea was able to act swiftly, and the president or separate governors, people in charge were able to be okay, this is what we need to do. This is the plan we have. This is the information we have. Let's talk to the medical professionals, develop a plan, and then tell what we're going to do, right? The United States response is a stark contrast. They were basically oh, it's not a big deal. Let's ignore it. And then it got really big. They still didn't listen to medical professionals. And once they realized that it was too big and they had to handle it, they just didn't know what they were talking about. They just kind of incited mass hysteria. And even the ones that were saying the right things, nobody believed them because the trust had been eroded, right? You're no longer going to trust the government that let it get to those proportions. And so people are now just oh, they're lying, right? And so you have this dissonance where one group is so kind of buying so much into the misinformation that they're misleaded, and then the other group is so not buying the misinformation that they believe the entire thing is fake, right? There's those two things, and that speaks to how important and how disruptive misinformation is in a democracy, and also how polarizing our current system is, right? And how polarization is very much similar to misinformation. And I think the third thing we can take away from this is just how bad American healthcare is. Korea is capitalistic as hell. I don't know if I can curse on this podcast.
Okay.
I will refrain. So it's quite a capitalist country, but also we have public healthcare. Okay, so when I went to school in Korea, I broke my leg playing basketball. And I just went to the hospital, paid $3 for an x-ray, checked that it was broken, and then got medication. And the medication was expensive. My mom was like, dang it, that's expensive. It was $15. And that is expensive. That is expensive for Korean medication. That's the thing, right? But in America, if I had to go through the same procedure, right? First, the ambulance cost me $100. Then I need to get an X-ray, which is like another $100-ish. And I'm like, these are not accurate figures, by the way. They're probably like way bigger than this because I've never,
Yeah, 1,000 or something
yeah,
for an ambulance
I've
right now.
never done healthcare I
Yeah,
like
your
try
plans,
not to
though.
injure myself in America. It's like a pretty big thing, right? If I'm injuring myself, I'm doing it in break. I'm just gonna like fall off a cliff. Um, but yeah, it's like ridiculous. The ambulance costs more than my entire trip. And then you have the x-ray, and then you have the procedures, and you have to check if your insurance covers it, and your insurance might not cover it. And if they don't cover it, you're screwed. You have to pay it off. You have to do all kinds of things. And ultimately, the bill comes out to be some ridiculous amount. That should not happen, right? And
Mhm.
that is one of the reasons why this pandemic also grew out of proportions. And I think there's two links to this. First of all, is the immediate lack of healthcare. If you're sick, even if you want to go to the hospital, you can't, right? Because it's too expensive. And especially earlier on in the pandemic, and actually even to this day, testing kits, you might have to buy them, right? Private testing kits are the thing that's kind of more available right now, and those are expensive, right? Hence, the NBA players can afford them. The average, Joe cannot. So you see this immediate lack of healthcare really impacting people. And then the second thing that's impacted by this is the healthcare system has conditioned people to not go to hospitals or medical professionals unless absolutely necessary. And here's the thing that's really insidious about the coronavirus is that especially if you're someone who's like 18, 25, 23, you might not have severe symptoms. You might be completely asymptomatic, right? And you might have a cough, you might have a fever, like a very slight fever, but you're going to look at that and do what you've always done in the American system, which is, oh, it's not that big of a deal. Just letting it go through is more cheap than going to the hospital and just making sure everything is okay. And so you have a system that's conditioned people to not go to the hospital. And in a situation where they have to go to the hospital, they still won't, right?
Mm.
And so that's a clear problem. And that is what happens a lot, right? You read posts online about people who are unable to go to the hospital or didn't go to the hospital because they didn't think it was a big deal. There's a few reforms that we have to do. And if we're taking this a very realistic scenario, there's only so much we can do, right? Because I can craft like a perfect thing I want to propose and I can write it down and propose it. But the fact of the matter is American politics means that it's never going to pass, right? There's going to be lobbyists. There's going to be all these things. I don't think there's really a realistic direction we can take this unless we somehow realize that, okay, it's time to put some of the petty politics behind us and realize that there's more than just like your job, like more than just your politics at stake, right? There's more than just, oh, I need to be able to run another term.
Have you been following the relief bill that they're trying to pass in the Senate?
Yeah, they're trying to pass a relief bill, and obviously, like a ton of people are. Well, I wouldn't say a ton. I think support has increased over the weeks, but yeah, it's still like it's not a bill that's by any means unanimous, right? It's a bill that's actually facing quite a bit of resistance, and I would expect it to be modified more. And even in its current state, it's not quite ideal. It's not like a Korean response. It's very much compromise to help the capitalist society. And so like it's a good bill. It's I wouldn't say good. I think it's a good step in the right direction. But especially with modern politics at stake, I don't know if it would pass as we want it to, which is unfortunate.
Yeah. No, I think that the Democrats are blocking it because of the corporate bailouts that they have. And then the Republicans are also mad at the Democrats because they have like some of their own like policies that they want to put in there too.
Yeah, because there's like, well, okay, first of all, the bailouts are just, I'm not an economist, so I'm not going to speak on that. I don't think I'm qualified to, so I won't. But there's also like, the bill, at least the Democrats are trying to push like some forms of what you would call like public health care, right? There's some things like, oh, more free access, and obviously Republicans would be against that. And also there's just like, there's still a few people in Congress who just like straight up think this isn't that big of a deal, right? who think this is an overreaction. And passing a bill like that with public health care and like more support means a hit to the economy when the economy is already looking like it's going to go through another recession, right?
Mhm.
People don't want that. So it makes sense why it's not getting bipartisan support. It's just a little disappointing. But I've been disappointed before.
Yeah.
This has been a
American
disappointing
politics
year.
is pretty disappointing.
Yeah. Nothing ever gets done.
Yeah. It do be
Nothing ever
like
gets done. Unless it's stealing more of our information, then it always gets done.
yeah. Do you have any sort of, I guess, like long-term or short-term concerns about how this pandemic is going to affect you yourself?
Myself? Dude, I want to
Yes.
graduate, my guy.
Yes, that is important.
This is a pretty big deal for me.
Mhm.
That's
Yes.
a selfish
You've been
concern.
working
Like
for
I
4
kind of
years
want.
right?
Yeah, I was also like looking forward to spending time with my friends. Like we were gonna go to Boston a bunch and
Mhm.
mess around and have fun, totally illegally, of course. But like that is looking unlikely by the day, right?
Mhm.
Obviously, there hasn't been a final decision yet on whether to cancel or not cancel, move classes online.
Mhm.
But I would be surprised. Like I was talking about this with a few people yesterday. A lot of people give it less than 5% chance that we go back on campus. And if we don't
Mhm.
go back on campus, that sucks because that's a huge part of what should be my high school experience kind of cut out, right? Prom and all that jazz.
I agree.
That's like the most immediate concern. I think the bigger picture concern though, especially in regards to me, well, I guess this doesn't affect me as much because I'm an American citizen, but just how this affects international politics, right? Because we've already seen travel bans in place. We've already seen the economic effects this will have and have had on the United States, right? Some really high unemployment rates, people not being able to go to their jobs, things looking really, really grim for Wall Street. And so all that culminates in a situation where the United States might have to take some extreme measures. And that's concerning for an international person because often those extreme measures hit the international people first, right? Or they hit marginalized groups first, right? Because America is very much billionaire first. And so in a situation like this, you're concerned about all those, all my friends who are on financial aid coming from all parts of the country, all the people who are here working but no longer have a job, those are the people that are affected most by this, and that is a little concerning because I think, at least for me, that's a huge part of America, that it's diverse, that it's a place for quote unquote everyone, and despite the fact that that's, excuse my language, that's fucking bullshit. Um, the facade of that at least allows me to interact with a diverse set of people. And, there are the few stories that are really good that make you believe, okay, there are some benefits to this system. And, maybe we have to work some kinks out. But ultimately, the original dream, the optimistic dream of America isn't completely fruitless, right? It's just been corrupted by business and monopolization and billionaires and the continuing decline of democracy. But ultimately, that core ideal is something that maybe we can hold on to. And like in a situation like this, that concept seems farther and farther away and seems more elusive because people are in danger of losing their livelihoods. People are going to be, a large amount of people are unemployed because their shops are closed. They're not being paid off. We see billionaires trying to force their employees to take pay cuts so that they can survive, right? We see travel blocked, maybe even trade being blocked, although obviously that didn't happen. All these things that have an adverse effect on, the people that are marginalized the most. That took a long time to formulate. That's just a little worrying, right? And it's not like America is a good place to begin with. It's just fucking getting worse. And that's a problem.
Yeah, definitely. What do you say about, like, can you pinpoint, I guess, like, any information that you'd like that would make you, like, feel better about the situation?
Like information from the government?
Like, from anything, like, in terms of, like, when the pandemic's going to end, or, like, from the government, what they're trying to do, or just get, like, literally anything.
Okay, I don't think the government can really do anything to help the situation. I mean, to comfort me at this point, I do think having a finalized vaccine of some kind is probably going to be pretty helpful. We're in the initial testing phases of multiple different vaccines, and I'd assume we'll find a vaccine at some point, and one that works. But knowing that that's coming and that it's coming and we have a timetable for it is probably going to be extremely comforting, because then I can kind of know, when I need to replan things, like how I need to adjust for how long. But obviously that's ways and ways away. Vaccine testing periods can take from 6 months to 2 years. And even once it's finalized and it's tested to work, you need to start mass producing them. You need to get it checked with big pharma, whatever. You got to start working on that. So it's going to take a while, right? I think the last epidemic that was like this was H1N1, which was, almost a decade ago now. I feel old. So, H1N1 happened, and the H1N1 epidemic took, about a year and a half to resolve from the first case to, like, quote unquote, the last case. And so that's probably where this will kind of reside, which is a little unfortunate, because that means probably the entirety of 2020 is going to be dominated by this virus, right? Much like how H1N1 dominated that year. So
Yeah,
considering this probably started in November 2019, it's probably going to go all the way to early 2021.
So looking at this kind of, like, long timeline of this virus, how do you think that's going to impact, I guess, your plans for the future?
My summer plans are dead.
Rip.
Yeah, no, going to Italy, I think that's a bad idea. I'm not suicidal. I wouldn't do that. But yeah, I think number one, long-term wise, all my plans are canceled, effective immediately, right? So, I was gonna meet with my friends in Korea and stuff. That's probably out of the window. Maybe Korea gets a little better. Traveling to Europe is definitely out of the window. So that's pretty annoying. More long-term like that, I'm not entirely sure. If we're projecting this to go until early 2021, that probably means, like, my first semester of college will also be online, which means my matriculation will also be online, which would be interesting.
Yes, matriculation to Zoom University.
Yeah. I used Zoom for the first time yesterday. Can I just say that service is, like, just marginally better than Skype. It's just good enough that I can understand why businesses are switching, but it's not good. It's really, I mean, okay, it's nice that you can have a video call with like 10, 11 people with all their videos on, and you don't get hit by a Skype. Oh, you need to pay for that. But the video quality is pretty bad. Some of the hosting options is pretty bad. The UI is kind of atrocious. I don't understand what's going on. And unless you have an account, you can't do longer than 40 minutes, which I guess isn't that bad, all things considered. You don't have to pay. And I think the funniest thing about freaking Zoom is they have this virtual backgrounds option. So basically, you can put a green screen behind you, and you can click like a virtual background to upload, and it will do it for you. And when I saw that, my first question was, who the hell is using green screen on Zoom? Like, what? You're like in a business meeting. And you're going to sit there, you're going to set up a green screen before you log in. And then you log in and then you see yourself in the beach. Like, is that what you want to show your colleagues, that you're in Florida or that you're in space? I mean, cool option, but like, it's weird. Anyways, long-term plans. I think, yeah, university is pretty bad. Being forced to use Zoom is also pretty bad. Sorry. I know Zoom's like stock is like zooming up especially right now. But I would sell. I would sell high.
No.
Um, yeah, I just think it's kind of unfortunate that one of the most important years of my life is going to be kind of compromised, and that affects me very long term, right? Like I'm not entirely sure when I can leave Korea, when I'm going to be able to see my friends again. That's a pretty tough sell. So, there's a lot of considerations. I don't think, well, hopefully this is all over in at least 2 years. And I don't think by that point it's going to be like, oh, remember that darn coronavirus and it screwed us over? God darn it, Corona. I don't think it's going to have like that long of an impact. It's not something like 9/11 where, you think about it years after it and you can clearly see that it's impacted people. I think this will be more of a bout of hysteria, maybe a turning point in American politics, especially with the election coming up. But at least personally, it's not something like me that I'll look back on and be like, that was a formative experience. It's mostly just going to be, that was annoying. I'm so glad I can go outside now. I'm so glad I can enjoy the weather. And maybe as someone who adores history, maybe we can look back at the coronavirus as a historical landmark, as an important point in history where we realize, oh, our healthcare system sucks, everything is broken, our government sucks, nothing works ever. But I think as a personal experience, it won't have much significance other than that it happened and it sucked.
Got it. All right, do you have any final thoughts? Briefly.
Final thoughts.
Yeah.
Oh, this is cool. I don't know. I guess we talked about a lot of things in
Yeah.
quite a short period of time. And I think, well, first of all, a lot of stuff I talked about was quite negative. But I do want to tell the people of the world that I am actually an optimist. And you might not believe this, but I am. Okay? Because I'm such an optimist that I thought the Boston Celtics were going to win last year. Okay? Like,
Hey, Charles.
that's how optimistic I am. But I will say that it does look like it's doom and gloom and a lot of things is ending. But, if you just take caution, don't overreact, this will be over, right? This is not going to be the end of the world. So we just have to hope it all works out. Don't panic and just keep ourselves in check. Wash your hands with soap. Shower. Don't go outside unless absolutely necessary. Practice social distancing. Just stay in your room, guys. Perfect haven to play video games and read books. There's a lot of good books. I would recommend it.
Yes, wise words from Charles. All right, thank you so much for being on my podcast today. And
This was a fun experience.
yes, please stay safe. Don't get coronavirus.
Yeah, I don't
Yes.
think. Okay, my younger brother does have a fever.
Oh, Charles! No, no, no.
I mean, he hasn't been outside. He's been playing League of Legends straight in his room for like a week and a half. I think he has like migraines. I think it's probably like a migraine attack that comes with like something. I don't know. I'll be
Well,
fine. I have a
I-
good
I
immune system.
thought coronavirus and that he's going to be well and that you are
Yeah.
going to be well too.
He still has a sense of smell. So
That's good. Yes, that's very important. All right, Charles, thank you so much. And I will see everybody next time on Inside Politics.
woo.
Hey everyone, this is Christina. Thank you so much for watching Inside Politics. Please be sure to check out the outtakes linked in the description, and feel free to check out the rest of the interviews on my channel as well. See you next time!